Hello, and welcome to the January 21st, 2018 edition of Shrewsbury Matters, a monthly show that presents a different perspective on the town's politics and problems. My name is John Lukach. The topics for today's show are listed on slide 1. First, how about becoming a candidate for town meeting and why it's so important to get new members elected. Second is the preliminary 2019 budget and the fact that the school budget continues as the primary cause of the town's budget problem. Third is the preliminary cost estimates of the Beal School replacement project. Fourth is that we may have another problem with the water system. A new problem has appeared, and the issue may be with customer meters, all of which were to have been replaced a few years ago, but may not have been. So let's begin. First of all, on becoming a candidate for town meeting. I devoted last month's show to explaining why it's so important to get new people elected to town meeting. So now I'll just briefly reiterate that town meeting needs many new independent-minded members from all precincts in town in order to revitalize town meeting. And it's easy to become a candidate. Just take out nomination papers from the town clerk's office, get signatures of at least 10 registered voters in your precinct, and return the signatures to the town clerk's office. The last day for returning signatures is March 13th. For more information on becoming a town meeting member and why the town needs new members like you, you can live stream the January 2018 edition of this program by going to the Shrewsbury Media Connection online video library on the town website under the playlist for Shrewsbury Matters. The next topic is the preliminary 2019 town budget. The town manager reviewed the highlights of his proposed budget at a recent selectmen's meeting. The major theme is a familiar one. All municipal departments are able to keep their spending growth in line with revenue growth, but as usual, the school department does not. So all departments except the school department continue to keep annual spending growth at a reasonable level relative to revenue growth. Annual increases in the school budget are the primary cause of the town's recurring budget problems. It is not what is falsely called a structural deficit. So I just want to repeat, in talking about a structural deficit, it's important to understand what that term is supposed to mean. A structural deficit is a situation where an entity has no or almost no control over cost increases, and that these cost increases are rising faster than the available increased revenues needed to pay for those increased costs. But this is not true of the town budget. The municipal departments, they do control their cost increases. But while the school department could do a much better job controlling its cost increases, it does not. So therefore, there is no structural deficit. So let's go to the next slide, the preliminary 2019 town budget. And so why do I say that annual increases in the school budget are mostly controllable? Because 80% of the school budget is salaries. And the school committee could negotiate lower annual increases in salaries. It's important to remember in this context that because of the Great Recession, median household incomes had not increased between 2009 and 2016. Also, state aid to the town had dropped significantly during that same period. But the school committee ignored these economic facts of life. During this same period, average school salaries in Shrewsbury continued to increase at healthy rates each year. So it is the school committee that is primarily responsible for the fiscal problems of the town, not some imaginary structural deficit. So that's the point. All the departments in town, except the school department, are able to keep their average annual cost increases at or below the 2.5% level, which is the increase that the property tax can support. So what about the proposed new budget? Well, for 2019, the next slide shows the proposed school budget increase of the school superintendent, which was, he proposed 6.47%. The town manager proposed an increase of only 2.41%. Note that the town manager's proposal is approximately 2.5%, the level at which the property tax rate increases each year. Therefore, a 2.5% budget increase is sustainable, but the superintendent's proposal is not. Again, the source of this information is right off the superintendent's budget update at the February 14th meeting of the school committee. So, I probably will have more to say on this on the March show after the Finance Committee holds its public hearing on the school budget. With that, let's go to the next topic, which is the cost estimates for the new elementary school to replace Beal. Let's go to slide 5. The school committee received preliminary estimates, I guess they came from the architect, on building size and, well, the cost per square foot came from the architect. Building size was the school department's recommendation. So the school department's stated square footage request is substantially higher than the MSBA guidelines, and the building committee are using substantially higher than expected cost per square foot estimates. Now I just want to note that the MSBA is the organization that oversees school building projects in the state. Since it determines what costs in a building project will be partially reimbursed by the state, its guidelines should generally be followed. So let's go to slide 6. And so in December, the building committee provided the following estimates for a 790 student elementary school. The square footage, the MSBI guideline for what the town was proposing was 114,550 square feet. The school department request, however, was for 146,201 square feet. The cost per square foot that was being discussed, the only number provided at that particular point in time was the MSBA guideline for 2018 reimbursement, which was $326 per square foot. So you then go to, but just 1 month later, the committee presented a surprising cost per square foot estimate. So let's go to slide 7. Slide 7, for the same size school, this time the school department's based on, I assume, because it saw the MSBA guideline and realized that their original number was too high for square footage, reduced it slightly to 142,736 square feet. However, that's still 25% higher than the state guideline. The cost per square foot, however, now they came out with their initial estimate. It was $486 per square foot. That's 49% higher than the current reimbursement rate of the MSBA. That's amazing. So if we take those two numbers and multiply them together, the committee's estimated cost, and this is just the construction cost, would be $486 per square foot times 142,800 square feet, or $69.4 million. But those are only the construction costs. Typically, one has to add about 25% for furnishings and other costs. So adding that on, we end up with a total cost estimated at $86.7 million, plus or minus, because they were working in a range, but the number they were using for most of their calculations was that number. That's twice the final cost of the Shrewsbury Middle School. But there would be additional costs if the Glavin site were chosen. So let's go to slide 9, and we'll see why that is. If the Glavin site is chosen, this $86 million cost estimate would not include acquisition costs. and it might not include all of the demolition costs of the buildings that are currently there. And the MSBA does not reimburse for acquisition costs and might not reimburse for some of the demolition costs. The result would be an even higher net cost to the town if the Glavin site is selected. Another good reason to prefer the Allen property over, that's a good reason to prefer the Allen property over Glavin. Of course, the best reason to prefer the Allen property for the new school is its superior location relative to the school population it would serve. That would result in lower commuting costs for children, lower busing costs, a neighborhood school in an area that has no neighborhood schools currently. Makes a lot of sense. So let's go to let's focus on, go to the next slide, slide 10. School department claims it needs the extra space for special needs, such as English as a second language and other kinds of programs. However, the MSBA guidelines allows the town to put those numbers into its calculation. So there should be no reason why the town estimate for square footage is so much higher than the MSBA guideline. The second part about this is the building costs. The building committee claims that recent school building costs per square foot are already much higher than the MSBA's $326, and that inflation will further increase costs substantially. But its estimates are overstated. Let's go to slide 11. What's wrong with the cost estimates? Well, let's focus on the estimated cost per square foot of $486. That number is based on a scatter diagram that was brought before the committee. It's page 18 of the committee's January 23rd, 2018 update. And there are several problems with the diagram, including that the data behind the diagram was not provided. And that's important because the underlying data would tell us whether the diagram is a good indicator for Shrewsbury's likely building costs. The architect should provide this data in a subsequent meeting, since it is likely that a close analysis of this data will show serious problems with the estimate. And what are some of the problems with the data? Well, let's go to slide 12. So, first of all, the data includes high school building projects as well as elementary schools. And I think most people will acknowledge that high school costs per square foot are generally higher than for elementary schools for obvious reasons. The second point is that some of the schools included are not in comparable school districts. To compare us to Wellesley. Wellesley was one of the towns that was included in this survey, one of their projects. It was actually a high school project. So not only do you have a higher cost of a project, the Wellesley project, because it's a high school as opposed to an elementary school, it's going to have a higher cost because it's Wellesley. The third point is that the diagram shows large range differences in any given year. For example, in 2015, the difference between high and low cost per square foot was $127. That's a range of a huge range from high to low, and so those numbers, are pretty unreliable. So continuing on to slide 13, here are some other reasons why there's the square footage estimates are questionable. Some towns may choose to exceed MSBA limits and forego MSBA reimbursement on the excess cost. And then some cities like Boston and Worcester that get 80 to 90% reimbursement for their school building projects, they can afford to be a little extravagant in their needs, or wants, as I should say. And then third, another item would be that the final project cost could be less than the amount appropriated by a town. And let's go to the next slide, because that brings us to the Sherwood School estimating process. On that particular project, the initial total project estimate came in about $55 million. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was in that range. But then just 1 week later, they came back after negative comments from the public and said, oh, we've sharpened our pencils and the numbers come down by several $million. But the final project cost that was approved by town meeting in February of 2010, by that time, the total project cost had been reduced to $47.3 million. And in fact, at completion, millions were still unspent and were returned to the town. So the actual final cost was much lower than the initial estimate, perhaps $10 million or more than what the original estimate came in at. So why this great overestimate? It makes you have to think whether the same thing isn't happening here. So let's go to, let's see. So let's go, yes. So we're on the right slide. So why this estimation inflation? As I've indicated, conservative estimating is a good thing at this early stage of a project, but bloated estimates based on questionable data are not. So I'm just kind of wondering, is presenting such a high estimate or more than 86.7 million, intended to alarm people so that when a much lower estimate is finalized, people will be grateful to the committee for working so hard to reduce costs? Whatever the reasons, it is simply unprofessional to present such an outrageous cost estimate without thoroughly examining the data and the assumptions used to make the estimate. The building committee must do better. So now let's move to the fourth topic for today's show, and that is more problems, or potential problems anyway, in the water system. Just as background, the town engaged the Pioneer Consulting Group in late 2017, late summer 2017, to perform a water and sewer study. And in the consultant's report of November 14th, he said, the purpose of this study on the water side was to prepare a comprehensive water rate study. The initial, and based on that meeting, the November 14th meeting of the selectmen, after it was presented, the consultant's report, it was tentatively discussed that they would be implementing the new water rates in January. So but this implementation was delayed. So now let's go to slide 17. Slide 17 shows the statement that was posted on the town website. And I'll just read the underlined section, which says that the town's billing system must be updated. This will require a thorough review of the billing system to ensure accuracy prior to setting a new rate. Please reach out to the town manager's office with any questions, which I did. So, I didn't believe the reason given then, and I don't believe that reason now. And in fact, it seems that I was correct. So slide 18, as I stated on my December show, the reason for delaying the rate increases was probably not a need to review the billing system. And indeed, I believe the real reason, next slide, slide 19, is that the selectmen, I made the selectmen aware that if the proposed rates were implemented, many more residential customers in town would pay higher water bills than commercial customers for the same amount of water. So for an example, at 25,000 gallons, which is a reasonable amount of water for a family of 5 to consume, a quarterly residential bill for 25,000 gallons would be $119.40. For a commercial entity using the same amount of water, it would only be $112.70. And this billing discrepancy, this billing difference between residential and commercial bills would actually start to occur above 10,000 gallons all the way up to as many gallons as were being consumed. In other words, above 10,000 gallons, residential water bills will be higher than commercial water bills for the same amount of water. This makes no sense. So, let's go to slide 20. So I reached out to the town manager asking him about this billing system review. And what I got back was a spreadsheet indicating that the specific area of review was not in fact a billing system review, but a review of all the town's customer water meters. So it would appear that now the official reason for the delay in implementing new water rates had changed. This is not me saying that all the water meters had recently been replaced either. The next slide shows the amounts that town meeting appropriated for water meter replacement. Okay, this slide shows that between 2011 and 2014, the town appropriated a cumulative $1,750,000 to replace all the water meters in town. Well, okay, I guess suppose it's possible that we haven't gotten around to doing it, although why it would take so long is beyond me. However, if you go to the next slide, slide 22. Oh, and by the way, the reason why they were replaced is that it was hoped that replacing the meters would result in more accurate readings and a reduction in the town's unaccounted water and therefore additional revenues for the town. But no significant change in unaccounted water has occurred as a result. So now let's go to, if you're asking, well, were they all replaced? Well, they should have been, because if you go to slide 23, okay, the February 2014 water audit report prepared by consultant Tata and Howard, which I believe is still on the website if somebody wants to look that up, said that the town has allocated additional funding to replace the remaining residential and commercial meters by 2015. So here it is, more than 2 years later, and one would think that those meters had been replaced. And so we still haven't, if we have replaced them all, we're now turning around and having to review all these, most of these, or many of these water meters. Does that make sense? So again, based on the data in the town manager's spreadsheet that he sent me, it now appears that all the meters either were not replaced or that many new meters may have been installed incorrectly. Otherwise, why do a review of them? So on slide 24, we get to the water meter list. This is the one-page spreadsheet that I was given. It has, obviously you can't read this here. So I have extracted several points that could be causing serious inaccuracies in reported water consumption. Let me say that the number at the bottom says the total number of meters inventoried was 12,755. That's both residential and commercial. And I don't know whether that includes meters for municipal or school or you know, some other apartments. I would assume it would include apartments, but perhaps not. But anyway, that was the meter list that was provided. So let's go to slide 25. So in which I pull out some of the data from this to show you some of the more significant items, which look like they may be some serious problems. So number one on slide 25 says, the first line said meters with unknown size, 628 meters. So what's the problem with that? Well, if you don't have a meter, if you don't know the size of the meter, it's hard to know whether it's reading correctly. So that could be one reason for a significant underreporting of consumption. The second item says meters 1 inch or bigger, and that's 1 inch or bigger would almost most if not all of those would be for commercial entities which have need higher demand at certain peak levels. So that's why they need a bigger meter, ostensibly for the bigger water line that would handle that additional demand. So there's 475 of those. And again, the same problem. If you don't know what those meters are measuring, and you don't have the right size meter on the right size pipe, again, that could be a significant cause of unaccounted water and a significant loss of revenue to the town. So let's go to slide 26. These are additional issues that could result in under-reporting of consumption, and therefore loss of revenues and increased unaccounted water. So the first one is meters that were installed more than 15 years ago. Well, how can that be? All the meters were supposed to have been replaced. You have it on the word of the town consultant, and you have all the money that we appropriated to have them replaced. The second item says meters installed between 10 to 14 years. Again, that's outside the window when we started replacing, coming up with developing this water meter replacement program. So why are there so many meters that still haven't been replaced? Then we have meters without an installation date. So who knows? Maybe these meters are 50 years old. They may be 5 years old. Very poor record keeping, it seems to me, in the systems that they're using here. And then the last item is meters not associated to an account, and there were 157 of these. Again, same problem. If you don't know, well, in that particular case, you're probably if a meter's there, there's probably a water connection. And if there's a water connection, somebody's using water, but evidently they're not being billed for the water. Again, it's hard to know what these things mean exactly, but it seems that some of those could be serious problems. If you add up all these numbers I put on these two slides here, you come up with over 2,500 meters potentially. It could be somewhat less because there could be double counting in some of these. They may be some meters may be shown in more than one category. But if it's 2,500 out of 12,755, I believe the number I said, for total number of meters inventoried, that's 20%. 20% of the meters in town could have a problem, or at least they're indicating they need to be reviewed. After we had this aggressive, water meter replacement program in place, what is going on? So anyway, I brought a list of questions about the town manager's spreadsheet, and he has agreed to respond to them to me in a few more days. Okay? But if it turns out that there are major problems with the town's metering of all water connections to the town's water system, then this will be the fourth major water system problem to go along with the contamination issue, the unaccounted water problem, and the rate inequality problems. And all of these can be blamed on poor management. And who is supposed to be managing the water system in town, has overall oversight? It is the selectmen, who are also the town's water commissioners. I'm thinking that I will have to put my water rate petition article back on the town meeting warrant, which if approved would require water rate increases enacted by the selectmen to be ratified by town meeting before they went into effect. It seems to me that this may be the only way to send a clear message to the selectmen that their poor management of the water system will no longer be tolerated. My time is about up, and I will probably be reporting about these topics in the future. I want to remind you again to please consider becoming a town meeting member. Goodbye for now, and see you next month.